Back in Sao Paulo, the human factors team turns to the cockpit voice recorder, or CVR.
I have some good news for you. Runway at Cancun.
They need to understand the pilot's state of mind as they approach Sao Paulo the night of the crash.
The CVR enables us to get an idea of the interaction between crew members.
They learned that Captain Stefanini was quite concerned about the runway conditions.
Ask him about the rain. The runway conditions. Is the runway slippery?
TAM on final approach. 2 miles away. Could you confirm conditions?
It's wet and it's slippery, 3054.
Wet and slippery.
The pilot is already tense, and then he finds out that runway conditions are worse than usual, slippery and rainy. The tension can affect the pilot's perception, his concentration.
35 out, 35 out.
It now appears that Stefanini's anxiety about 35L, and not the runway itself, was the main cause of this crash. Camargo now focuses on the crew's actions.
I think it's ready, sir. Thank you.
He needs to understand how the power levers were handled before the crash. Using data from the flight recorder, investigators focus first on the landing just prior to the one at Congonhas.
We discovered that the same pilot, the captain, was the one operating the aircraft in the previous land and in Congonhas.
First, how did they land in Porto Alegre?
Okay. Both levers full forward during approach.
They learned that during the previous landing at Porto Alegre, Captain Stefanini pulled back both thrust levers. Exactly the right procedure for landing with only one reverser.
And now, both levers to reverse.
At the time of the accident, the correct procedure was for the pilot to take both throttles to idle and both throttles to reverse, as if you had no problem with the reversers.
They've established that Captain Stefanini carried out the correct procedure for landing with one thrust reverser on the day of the crash.
No reverser number 2. Auto brakes on. And speed is dropping.
It puzzled me because of the fact that a captain knew the procedure. He performed the correct procedure hours before in the previous landing.
So what did he do differently 2.5 hours later in Sao Paulo?
Okay, now Congonhas.
Left lever to idle.
The data shows that Captain Stefanini's handling of the thrust levers
Then reverse.
was very different on his landing in Sao Paulo.
20.
Instead of throttling back both levers, he only put the left engine in idle, leaving the right one at full power. Then, once the aircraft had touched down, he activated only the left reverser, again leaving the right engine at full.
That is quite different. I don't get it.
How could a guy that knew the aircraft, that knew the correct procedure, that executed a correct procedure, how could he do something different?
It doesn't seem to make sense
We could really use your help on this.
until Camargo enlists the help of another pilot. It's only then that he discovers an important detail that could explain what the captain did. It turns out there was an older, outdated procedure for landing an A320 with a single thrust reverser.
Could you demonstrate it for me, please?
It starts out the same, but then there's an important difference.
The former procedure was taking both levers to idle and then just the lever corresponding to the engine with the reverser operating normally, that would be taken to reverse position.
But that is not what Captain Stefanini did. He left the right engine at full power instead of bringing it to idle. If he was attempting the old procedure, he got it wrong. Investigators learned that Captain Stefanini would not have been the first pilot to make that mistake. There had been several accidents around the world. The cause was identical. Pilots mishandling the procedure for landing with a disabled reverser, inadvertently leaving one thrust lever at full power.
That old procedure led pilots to error.
Airbus finally modified the procedure to reduce the risk of precisely that error.
O fabricante mudou o procedimento.
The manufacturer changed the procedure and determined that both levers would come down together to the idle position, and then, right after touching the ground, both would come down to the reverser position.
Ambas viriam para a posição reversa.
Captain Stefanini was familiar with both the old and the new procedure for landing with the disabled reverser.
Retard.
It now seems on Flight 3054, he may have tried to use the old one. The question for investigators is why?